Howdy, folks. General back to you. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about CB radio. Some of the stuff we did back then. Now, this is way yonder before cell phones were even thought of. And little walkie talkies was half big as a dinner plate. Transistors hadn't been around that long either. But they had. Most of the stuff was tube type. Later years, in the late 60s, early 70s, as transistors started making their way to the front. But UCB radio consisted of a box with a speaker in it, a bunch of electronic guts, and a couple of receptacles. One was for a PL259 connector that went on your coax, and the coax was shielded wire, had a big old fat insulator on the inside with a piece of solid copper wire, and then over that was a braid, and then over that was a black insulator or insulation. And those things were soldered on. Those PL259 connectors were soldered on, and they pushed into the back of this receptacle, and then you back threaded the nut till it dropped in, and you screwed it on. That provided the common or the ground plane effect to the radio, and that ran to your antenna. Well, later years, people figured out how to add power to it, so you would boost your you'd come out of the back of your radio with 5 watts, and then that would go into what they called a linear amplifier, and that boosted on up to 40 or 50 watts, and then they'd come out of that with a piece of RG8U coaxial cable, which was big around as your little finger, with like 8 or 10 or 12 pieces of wire in it, probably around 14 gauge, no, not 14 gauge, probably around 20 gauge wire, but there was 8 or 9 of them in there. And that was inside a big fat piece of insulation, and then a big heavy braid over that, and then an outside insulation. So you ended up with something the size of your little finger, and your PL259 connector would just screw on the end of that, and then you soldered it. And if you did it wrong, it'd ground your radio out and blow it up. So you had to know what you was doing when you made those up. And that's one of the things that I made up when I was at the railroad, working in the cage. The cage was like that to keep people out of it. Didn't need to be in there. They'd come in there and swipe everything that you had, take it home with them. So they fixed us up a room, put a cage over the top too, so when you locked it up, nobody could crawl over the fence and get it. That was crazy. But this is back to, that was a VHF. We're on AM, so we were your radio set up. Most of the base stations were tube type. They had tubes in them instead of transistors, and they were a whole lot better than the transistor ones. Because back then they were transistors were still kind of new to the scene, and everybody liked tube type because it's so much clearer. And our antennas uh, ground planes, various configurations. Uh, I can't remember all of the ones. There's one of them looked like one of those things that a mannequin sets on. Had a ring at the bottom, and it slooped up like that, and then it had a upright with a cross at the top of it. I can't remember what that thing's name was. Uh, then we had big sticks. It was all fiberglass and stainless steel structure. It was a bar. Uh, had a wire up the middle of it. It's all fiberglass, white fiberglass, and then in the end of it, it had a place for a 102-inch fiberglass whip to screw into, and that was just a straight piece of wire inside like a fishing pole, but it was fiberglass and a little top cap on it, and it was made to go up in a tree. I mean, it didn't have any radials or anything on it, and a lot of people put those in trees. Some were on top of their houses and stuff, but your antenna said a lot about you. If you had a huge antenna, you had plenty of money because you had to not only buy the antenna and buy the ham M, because those big antennas were directional like beams, so you had to have a heavy enough rotor uh, on it to handle it. The ham M was the biggest one they had, and that sucker was big as a basketball and heavy as cast iron. Had all those gears in it. Then it was watertight too, because it's up on top of the mast. Mast is usually three pieces of pipe with a zigzag construction in between it. You see them at radio stations and stuff. Well, AM and FM radio stations. Well, if you had plenty of money, you had one of those in your backyard with a moonraker or something on top of it. Moonraker was like 20 feet long, I think, and it was a huge thing. And I helped put one up one time. A fella had a friend of his come by with a helicopter and picked the whole thing up, and we all guided it down. He had everything ready. Had the guy points painted red, where you could find them, you wouldn't trip over them. He went around and secured all of it. Excuse me. But we helped each other out. We'd all show up to somebody's house and give them a party or something, or desk mics were real nice. You could just mash the button here, a little bar, and didn't have to pick the mic up. You just hit it. But the bad thing about it had a lock on it. You could push it down, push that lock back. It's just a little handle, and just sit there and talk without holding the button down. And then you reach over and just tap the button, and it would release the lock. Well, we had this one fella, I'm not going to say his handle, don't want to get him in trouble. We had this one guy, he excuse me, him and his wife had just got into it, so he reached over and slapped the thing to sign off, and when he did, he slapped it hard enough, the lock swung over and locked it in the on position, and they had about a 30-minute long cuss fight. And back then, you did not say one single word like a cuss word on the radio. And we had about 30 minutes of that. And somebody went by their house and you heard heard him banging on the door. He said, "What do you want?" He said, "Come to the door right now." So he came out there and we heard him say, "You're cussing on the radio." You said you locked your mic down and said you've had about 35 or 40 minutes of cussing on there. So he got on there and apologized. I don't know where the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, they kind of watched over us, kept us in line. I don't know whether he got in trouble with them or not over it, but they'd have kept going if he hadn't stopped that. But that was just one of the instances. But what you do, you get on there, and you break, and somebody say, "Go ahead. Can you hear this darn thing? I've been having trouble with it." "Yeah, you sound pretty good on this end." And it'd go like that. Well, we had this one set bunch of goofballs, and I guess every town had a group, that they'd get together. And old boy'd get on there and say, "Break." He said, "Yeah, come on." Or you'd call somebody and call them by name, and not by name, by their handle. So he'd get back on there and say, "Oh, hey, Charlie." I said, "Yeah." I said, "I need some help." I said, "I've got too much coax up here on my radio stand and in the floor." He said, "Would you pull some back on your side?" Now they're talking on the radio now. One might be in Camac and the other in Georgetown, "Yeah, I'll start pulling. You say when. Slow down now." "Oh, stop. You almost pulled the radio off the table." and BS such as that. There's all the time some kind of something going on the radio. And you couldn't cuss on there at all. And your kids is in there, your kids would get on there every once in a while. You had to be there when they were there, to make sure that they were doing right. But if you had family, your wife, your kids, your grandma, it doesn't make any difference. If they want to talk on the radio, fine, as long as they didn't cuss. And you'd hear the women, they'd get on there and share recipes. Well, see, you're not just talking to your friend. It's like a party line. When you say something, the whole cotton picking world hears you. And well, not the whole world, but I mean, unless you're on skip, and it depends on weather conditions. Sometimes you could talk to somebody as far away as Canada. I talked to Canada on the back of my girlfriend's daddy's beams. They were pointed to Florida from where he was at down in Georgia. And I talked to Nova Scotia, Canada on the back end of his beams. He didn't believe it, and I said, "All right." I told him his guy's handle. I said, "Break on him." He said, "Yeah." I said, "Where are you at?" He said, Winnetoga, Canada. I think is where he was. He said, "And you're on the back of my beams." My girlfriend said, "You just tickled the dickens out of Daddy." I said, "Well," I said, "that's who I was talking to." I said, "He thought I was full of beans." I am full of beans, but yeah. It was fun talking on CB radio. You learned you could talk to people, uh, see if it was raining where they were at. It might be just pouring down where you're at and not raining at all where they were at. Just different subjects that you'd talk to. It was kind of like YouTube too. If you wanted to know how to do something, you just ask, and it's just like YouTube. Half of it was BS, and the rest of it was so. And every once in a while, you'd find somebody that knew what they was talking about, and they'd tell you how to do it. That's exactly like YouTube. YouTube is just the internet instead of radio waves, and it's just a growing uh, pile of BS, if you will. It's just different ways to share it, but it was so much fun. I had a mobile set up on my car, and well, back when I was a kid, I had mobile set up on my bicycle. It was a walkie-talkie, but I had it set up where I could talk on it, pedal, and I had a tree out back, and I climbed. I had a pretty nice antenna in the top of it, and I'd go up there and hook my little 500 milliwatt walkie-talkie up to it, and I could talk all the way to the next township. And I lived on a hill, so I happened to be right in the band right there. You couldn't do anything on the ground, just static. But you went up in the top of that tree and hooked that antenna up, and you had some miles that you'd get to. Put me right in the layer that I needed, the air layer. People don't realize the air has got different layers of frequencies that it lays in. Now, CB radio was 27 megacycle. Is a 27 megacycle band, and I stayed on channel 11 most of the time. And that was 27.085 megacycles. And I don't know about the rest of them. That's all the ones I can remember. But it's 27.085 megacycles on the 27 megacycle band. And one of my jobs was installing antennas on cars and trucks. I never did do any on big rigs or anything, but I did on campers and pickup trucks, luxury cars and stuff, with Cadillacs and stuff. And you had to drill a hole in the top of the car. And I think it was a 3/8 hole. And then it had a little thing, a little thing. It had about 4 or 5 fingers in it. That was, when it was shoved together, it had a little latch, little hook on them. You pushed that down in the hole, and in this sleeve, you pushed it down in it. But when you did it, it brought those fingers out, and they latched on the underside of the metal. And then you put a plate down, which was like a flat washer, but it was made out of some kind of special stuff. And then you put a run of what was the name of that stuff? It wasn't silicone, because silicone I don't think had been out yet, but it was something similar to silicone. The weather adhesive goo that dried kind of like silicone. And then you screwed this base piece on there, which it wasn't but about that high, but you screwed it down on this Uh, it was a rubber washer like thing that set on the weather adhesive, and then it had uh, like a little drop down area in it that this top piece screwed into. Well, you already had uh, you had taken the trim loose, pulled the headliner down a little bit, and run uh, a piece of RG58 uh, RG58U coax, I think. Run it up through that hole. Then when you put it together, you put that wire up through there, and then you stripped it back so far you had a braid inside. You spread it out, and you skinned the wire back, up so far you had its center insulator. You left it high enough to where it would clear, and you spread this uh, your braid out, and then you put this screw cap on there that tightened down and secured it to the braid. So that put the braid directly on the antenna and directly on ground of the car. That was your ground plane effect. The car was. And then your center insulator went on up a little ways, and then it went into just a single strand of about 20 gauge solid copper wire. And you had to make sure it was trimmed to the T, because it had to go up in this little thing sticking up. And then the one side of that piece sticking up had a little holiday down through it, so you bent that wire over in that holiday and smoothed it down. Okay, that's your center conductor. And then you had a base that had a big coil of wire in it, and then up to about a 3-foot long little whip antenna, a little piece of wire at about, maybe 14 gauge stainless steel wire with a little round knob on top of it. And that was equivalent to a quarter wave antenna, which was a pretty good antenna for a car. And it was low enough. Now, when you went into a parking area or something, you'd hear dingity, 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 ring, 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 where it was dragging the concrete overhead, but it wasn't hurting nothing. It just shined the ball up a little bit. But you had to put all the trim and all that stuff back, make sure the headliner was smooth and all that stuff. And some people wanted a little piece of cardboard under it, where the wire wouldn't push down too much on the headliner. And it was foam headliners anyway. It's whatever the owner wanted. And I was working at a store doing it. So they had taught me the professional way to do it. So that's what I did. Installing antennas on vehicles. And helping install antennas on people's houses or in their trees or towers and stuff. And I ended up my last job working on the railroad was installing antennas on top of locomotives. So I've installed a lot of antennas, made up a lot of coax, make it up, put the PL259 connectors on it, crimp them on, and let her eat. Make them up in 10-foot rolls and 20-foot rolls, 30-foot rolls. That way you get what you need and put it up. And so I've done a whole lot of stuff radio wise in my life. I'm into my 70s now, so I'm retired, but I'm kind of downloading every once in a while. Uh, putting some of my knowledge out there. People don't know diddly squat about CB radio, and us old CBers, there's nothing out there really to listen to, you know, to tweak our ears, where we bend an ear and say, hey, somebody talk about CB radio. I'm going to listen to that. So there's a few more of my little things that my dad would take my walkie-talkie. It was a 5-watt, 6-channel walkie-talkie. He'd take it out in the boat with him for ship-to-shore radio when he was in the fishing down at the Keys. I bought it by mowing yards when I was a kid. Got it from Radio Shack. It was the biggest walkie-talkie they made. Thing was huge. It was about that big a square and about that tall. Then it had a center loaded telescopic antenna that stuck up, I bet, 6 feet anyway. But you could talk on that thing now. You could talk as far as a mobile could. But my best, I guess the best radio I had was a Chris T23 radio, and had a 8-track tape player attached to it on a slip-in bracket. You slip it in under your dash. I had it at work, and somebody couldn't get the thing out. They was trying to steal it, and they took a pry bar to it, and they got it out, but it set my whole dash on fire, and it burnt the whole dadgum dash out of the car. And all it was just mash a button and pull it out, but they didn't know that. They burnt my car up. Love a thief. All the way to the grave. But anyway, everybody had a handle. Nobody used their real name on there. And mine was BW. I asked my dad when I first started. I was in junior high school. And my teacher, my instructor in shop class, was into CB radios. He got me started in the 7th grade in junior high school. Me and him hit it off pretty good too. And Dad said, well, you hunt Bob White quail. Just be Bob White. I said, hey, that's a good idea. So I went on there as Bob White. And I stayed Bob White forever, You still had to put your call letters out there, but most everybody went by their handle. And later years, probably 20 years into it, somebody had the idea of shortening the handles down to just letters, abbreviated. So Bob White went to BW. So I was BW. People didn't know my name, but they'd known me for a long time, talking to me. So I was the BW, the Bob White. And let's see. Most of these quarries have got big containers with chutes on them, and then they control the clamshell uh, closure at the bottom of these chutes, and you just pull your truck up and under it, and they'll beep the horn when they get ready for you to stop, and then you tell them on CB radio, all right, go ahead and start. And they'd run it in there and said, okay, you're getting close now. I said, okay, that's good right there. And then they'd shut that clamshell, and you thank them, They'd be up in the control tower watching you on camera, talking to you on CB radio. If you didn't have a CB radio, you had to get out of the truck, watch it, hold on a minute, pull up a little bit where you could put more on the back or on the front, because you didn't want a lot on the back. You didn't have any steering. You had to put it up more toward the cab, and there was a lot of people using CB radio right, and there's a bunch of us, and we shot the beans. All right, I'm gonna get off here. I could talk forever about CB radio because I was in it for so long. But y'all come back. Say, oh, let me throw this in there. 73s. Okay, when you get ready to get off of the radio, off of the talk that you were doing at that time, when you clearing out, say, well, 73s to you. Well, that was best wishes. 73s, best wishes. Okay. If you was talking to a girl, 73s and 88s. Well, that's best wishes and kisses. 88s were kisses. And I'm sure there were some more out there, but those are the two main ones that you had. We used the 10 code. 10-4 was okay or yes or I've got it. 10-5 was relay message. So if you were trying to get to somebody and you didn't have enough power to get to them and they couldn't hear you, you'd say, would somebody 10-5 this to Whistle Britches over here? So somebody would pick that up and get hold of this other guy on his radio, and he would tell him what you wanted to tell him. So he would be the center person, and you could 10-5 all over the place, see. 10-7, if you were going off the air, you don't fix to cut the knob off, you'd come in there with your handle, and then put your call letters in there, and I'm going 10-7, and reach over and turn your knob off. Because if you didn't, people would come back to you and back to you and back to you. You never would get off of it. So just as soon as you say I've gone 10-7, turn knob off. And let's see, 10-20 was location. What's your 10-20 or what's your 20? Like if I was in the boat fishing, somebody said, BW, where are you at? I said, well, or BW, what's your 20? I'm about 50 feet south of the main building at the Hales Bar Dam Powerhouse, fly fishing that bank back there. Well, then they'd know that you weren't going to be able to come and help them with their fix their tire, You're down there fly fishing the bank. And such as that, somebody says, hey, where you at? Are you busy? What's your 20? What you up to? Oh, nothing much. Said, wonder if you can help me. I'm up here broke down on the side of the highway and ran out of gas. And I got a flat tire. All right. Whereabouts, what mile marker you're at, what you close to, and I'll be up there shortly. And you'd go get what they needed and take it to them. They'd give you your money back for it, most of them would. And then y'all go eat together or something, go kick around a little bit. But sea bears love sea bears, most of them. So, and some of them were grouchy, some of them were bullies, They're not having a good day, so why should anybody else? That type of thing. But most of the time, sea bears were pretty good folks. We had the 21 Club here in Chattanooga. There wasn't a fee or anything to be a member of the club, but there were rules and stuff. You couldn't cuss and you couldn't drink, alcoholic beverages. There wasn't no dope back then, thank God. Most everybody smoked. There's no wacky backy going on. That marijuana, left-handed cigarettes. But we'd rent a space at one of the pavilions in like a state park, and we'd have it reservation there, and on a certain day, we'd have a coffee break, Channel 21 coffee break. So we'd put it out on there, and there'd be between 50 and 1,000 people show up, and I think it was like $1 or something like that you had to kick in if you was going to be drinking coffee. That helped buy the coffee, naturally. But I mean, once you paid the fee, you drink all the coffee you wanted to, or tea, or whatever it was. And then we had square dances. One club or another announced, hey, we're going to have a square dance such and such at the skating rink on whatever road it was on such and such day at such and such time. No drinking allowed. And such band is going to play. So I'd go to the dances with my girlfriend, and when somebody in the band had to go to the bathroom, they'd call me to the stage, and I'd go up there and play in their spot until they got back from whatever they was doing, and then I'd go sit back down. And I never was really in a band. I just sat in, when they needed to go to the bathroom, or if one of them wanted to dance with a girl or something, they'd call me to the stage, and I'd play whatever. Never could play drums worth a poot. But mainly guitars. I can't even play guitar now with carpal tunnel on both sides. My fingers don't work right. All right, I done talked long enough. I love everybody. Remember the golden rule: do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. I love y'all. Y'all like and subscribe. Hit the bell, make comments. This General. I'm out.